Welcome to part 5 of my journey into the Paul is Dead conspiracy, which began at the start of the UK's first pandemic lockdown in March 2020. It was a strange dystopian time when it was difficult to know what was true, amidst the variety of facts, fiction, information, disinformation, rumours, rules and regulations. Hypocritically, senior government figures and political and scientific advisors responsible for lockdown rules were among the first to break them. With restrictions on daily life and freedom of travel, I had enforced time on my hands to research and read various books, including the Memoirs of Billy Shears. Memoirs is historical fiction, which is a legitimate genre of literature which places fictional characters in a real historical setting, allowing the fiction writer many opportunities to tell a totally unique story. However, stories take on a life of their own when pre-existing conspiracy theories merge with fictional characters taken from historical fiction books. This presentation examines the claims made online about the late Phil Akrill, the rhythm guitarist with 60s Birmingham-based beat boom group Denny Laine and the Diplomats. Similar to Memoirs' footnote about Dr. John Coleman and his claims regarding the Committee of 300, the Memoirs fans' claims and speculation about Phil Akrill also begin with a footnote. The footnote shown here appears on page 140. And states that William is playing down the significance of seeing the Beatles at the Plaza Ballroom in 1963, and that he, as part of the Diplomats, had an arranged meeting with the Beatles backstage. Let's just hold on a second here. Part of the Diplomats is a bit vague. It could be taken that he was a roadie and not actually a member of the band, if one was being pedantic. But anyway, it is historically correct. Denny Laine and the Diplomats did support the Beatles on that day. Whether or not they met the Fab Four backstage, Diplomat drummer Bevan oddly doesn't mention in his recollections of this milestone event. Memoirs doesn't mention the name Phil Akrill specifically in relation to this momentous event either. But that doesn't stop what feels like endless photo comparisons and claims that the current Paul McCartney is the Diplomats' then rhythm guitarist Phil Akrill on internet platforms and groups. Let's see how things look when we unpick fact from historical fiction. But first, a bit of background information. By the end of 1962, rock and roll was in danger of becoming extinct. Thankfully, the British beat boom was on hand to rejuvenate and revitalise matters with its freshness and excitement created by guitar-based groups. Also, thankfully, to hire purchase, the cheap and cheerful credit system that powered Britain's post-war boom that enabled the purchase of big-ticket goods such as cars and washing machines by the working-class adults. And not forgetting guitars and drums, bought by Britain's 60s teenagers and paid for in instalments on the so-called Never Never. The Beatles weren't the only group to originate from Liverpool during the early 60s beat boom. Their stablemates Jerry and the Pacemakers had their first UK #1 hit with How Do You Do It, before the Fab Four had theirs 3 weeks later with From Me to You. Dick Rowe, a record executive for Decca Records, famously rejected the Beatles on the same day he signed Brian Paul and the Tremolos in 1962. Because coming from Dagenham, they were closer to London and therefore would be cheaper to work with. Every major English city produced guitar-playing beat groups. Some made it big, some rose to fame and remained, while others faded rapidly, and most didn't make it at all. There's no official second city in England, but it's a title either Manchester or Birmingham could arguably claim. Both boast an equally prodigious history. Formed in the same year Dick Rowe was rejecting the Beatles, successful 60s groups, the Hollies and Freddie and the Dreamers, both came from the northern city of Manchester. Not to be outdone, Birmingham and the West Midlands can claim its own musical heritage, with a 60s drumbeat music scene and an impressive list of groups with musical styles ranging from pop to heavy metal. Among my favourites were the Moody Blues, but I have to say I preferred the Moody Blues after Denny Laine had left the band, and I never liked Go Now, their number one hit with Denny. However, I did like his solo output, especially Say You Don't Mind. Like most on the 60s music scene, Denny had also played in other bands. He even had one named after him, well, his stage name. Also in Denny Laine and the Diplomats was Bevan, who had become the drummer with The Move and later ELO, and a rhythm guitar player called Phil Akrill, seen here standing at the back behind Bevan, sitting posing with the drum. The adherents of the Memoirs of Billy Shears believe Phil Akrill is the current Paul McCartney. Memoirs is historical fiction, and so locked down with time on my hands, I thought it might be interesting to do a bit of research and see how historical fact compares with fiction when unpicked. It's not uncommon for band members to meet at school, or to have connections with other pop stars and celebrities who perhaps tried their hand at being a pop star who went to the same school. Such is the case with Moseley School, Birmingham, where drummer Bevan met comedian Jasper Carrott on his first day at Moseley School, and the two remained friends for life. Moseley School must have been a pretty cool school to attend, especially given all the other names from the world of pop music who also went to it. For example, early 60s yodeling pop star Frank Ifield, who gave the Beatles an early break by booking them as his support act in 1962. Ifield had his first UK number one hit in 1962 with I Remember You. And then there's Rod Allen, the lead singer with 60s harmony beat group The Fortunes. I used to love their hits You've Got Your Troubles and Here It Comes Again. Incidentally, their manager was shot in a dispute over pirate radio, something I forgot to mention in my pirate radio series. The Fortunes' second single, a ballad called Caroline, was adopted as a theme tune by the pirate radio station Radio Caroline. A-session guitarist Chris Spedding. Now he's been a mainstay of the British session scene since the late 60s and played with just about everyone. Also Richard Tandy, who was the keyboard player with the Electric Light Orchestra. He also attended Moseley Grammar School at the same time as Bevan and Jasper Carrott. On the 15th of June 2015, Jasper Carrott went back to school, and a plaque was unveiled at Moseley School, Birmingham. It had been 50 years since he left the school, but he had never forgotten the friends he made there. With Jasper Carrott on this occasion were his old schoolmates, from left to right, Tony Lewis, Bevan and Phil Akrill. Tony Lewis spoke of the time when he, together with Bevan and Phil Akrill, were in a band together when they were 13. Phil Akrill, here wearing a white jacket, spoke warmly of the bond the four friends formed from their Moseley school days. Now, it would be quite extraordinary if two men of a similar age from Birmingham, with the same name, Phil Akrill, played in 3 bands with Bevan. It doesn't mean that such a coincidence would be impossible, but it is highly improbable. So, I'm of the opinion that this is the same Phil Akrill who played with Bev and Denny Laine in Denny and the Diplomats. Previously in 1992, old schoolmates Jasper, Carrott, Bevan and Phil Akrill and others got together for old time's sake to rock out as the Belch Band. On the 29th of January 2021, Denny Laine posted on social media that he had received the sad news that his and Bevan's old Diplomats bandmate Phil Akrill had passed away. Denny Laine and Phil Akrill have now both passed away. Denny died on the 5th of December 2023, but the drumbeat music lives on in the memories of the generation who bore witness to it. Rest in peace, Phil Akrill and Denny Laine. Thank you for the music.